Welcome to Huntingdon District Council's Development Management Committee meeting. I would like to make you all aware that this meeting is being live streamed by the Council's YouTube channel. Please ensure that any mobile phones are switched to silent. So welcome to those who are watching at home. I would like to outline some housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please do so to myself. To enable your microphone, press the middle button that will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate that this has happened. Please press the middle button when you have finished speaking, as it is particularly important that members use their microphones so that audio can be picked up through the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding in the middle of a meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the meeting evacuation point outside of the building. So can we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Brereton, Dew, Clark, Jordan, Mickleborough and Tevlin.
Thank you. And the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for the last meeting. Do we all agree that these minutes are a correct record of the meeting held on the 17th of March? Item 2 is members' interests. Are there any members that would like to declare an interest in relation to items on the agenda this evening? But first, can I just bring in our Chief Planning Officer?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Just before you declare your interests, if I could just draw your attention to item 4A. As we know, we had discussed this last month and we deferred this item to enable our Environmental Health Officer to come and join us this evening. We will be considering this item from scratch this evening, and with that in mind, all members need to come to this item with an open mind. If any member feels that they cannot come to this item with an open mind, please declare your interest now. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. That's not why I'm declaring interest, for avoidance of doubt, but with respect to 4A, given the nature of the application, as I said last month as well, I'm a Cabinet member with responsibility for housing. I haven't been involved with a particular application. I'm not predetermined. I intend to participate, but I just want to put that on the record for completeness.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Nish.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to declare it as an item of interest, anyway, because I am the ward councillor. I'm also a parish councillor, and as a parish councillor, I don't sit on we don't have planning committees, but I do not participate in any involvement in the planning applications that they look through. I am actually there, but I don't vote, and I am here again with an open and free mind to discuss this item.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. Items 3A and also 5A, both have been considered by St Neots Town Council's Planning Committee, on which I sit on, and have participated in the debate, so I won't participate in this debate this evening for those two items. Okay. I'll leave the meeting for those items.
Thank you. Councillor Slade.
And I'm the same, so I sit on parish for 3A and 5A for the Planning Committee.
Thank you. Is that everyone? Then we'll move on to item 3A, which is St Neots, and we'll hear a report from our planning officer, Laura Fisher.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Just to note, we have Matthew Paul, our urban designer, with us here, who will be taking us through the design code on this application. Now, this application is referred to members in the public interest by the Chief Planning Officer. This site relates to an area at Wintringham, which was granted outline consent in 2018, which was subject to a Section 106 agreement and various planning conditions. The site is also allocated within the local plan under policy SEL2, St Neots East. Development at Wintringham is subject to site-wide parameter plans approved as part of the outline consent that set the overall framework of the development. The development is supported by a sequence of submissions structured into 3 tiers to provide a progressive layering of increasingly detailed information from the overarching and site-wide Tier 1 through substantive key phases Tier 2 to detailed reserve matters submissions within sub-phases and on individual development sites or reserve matters areas, which is Tier 3. This current submission seeks approval of Key Phase 2, Tier 2 details pursuant to Condition 8 of the Hybrid Planning Permission. The orange here shows the element that is before members this evening, which is set out in Condition 8 of the outline consent, as detailed in paragraph 1.6 of your reports. Just to note, it is only Condition 8B in relation to the design code that is before members. In relation to Tier 2, this key phase planning, the key phase tier requires an additional level of detail to be submitted to and approved by the Council, which includes documentation to set the definition of and provide a framework for each key phase. At this tier, a greater level of detail is provided. This technical information informs and establishes a base against which reserve matters applications can be assessed. Moving through the slides, this is the site-wide parameter plan for the wider Wintringham site. This current submission covers Key Phase 2 of the development, as annotated here in red, which is located centrally within the site. In relation to site photos, this is a current aerial view of Wintringham from the northern edge of Key Phase 2. So you can get a good idea of what has been constructed to date. This next aerial is taken from beyond the A428 looking west, with Key Phase 2 to the left-hand side of the photo. I'll now hand over to Matthew Paul, who will take us through the design code in some more detail.
Thank you, Laura. So starting off with the Key Phase 2 regulatory plan, this is the key reference plan which cross-references with chapters 3 to 6 of Part B of the code. So this identifies 5 residential parcels. These are shown in the yellow. The primary school and land for future expansion shown in the blue and the purple. The various green infrastructure components and location of pocket parks within each residential parcel. So they're shown by the green asterisks. The street hierarchy, location of parcel accesses, bus stops, active travel routes and cross-parcel permeability routes. The location of frontage characters, so these are marked by the black dashed outlines, and we'll cover those in a bit more detail later. Key groupings, which are marked by the red outlines, and marker buildings, which are the red asterisks. The green triangle in the centre of the site to the south of the central leap and neap is the indicative location for local facilities. So starting with the key groupings, so the design code identifies 3 key groupings at key nodal points that will see large amounts of activity and so require a more bespoke approach to ensure these represent the highest design quality. The code includes enhanced design guidance for each key grouping, covering aspects of landscape, access and movement and built form. The images on the right are from the civic green key grouping, and this is situated at the heart of Key Phase 2, forms an important central destination for the entire Wintringham development. The primary school mixed-use facilities form defining landmarks within this location, fronting the central green space. A summary of each key grouping is included in paragraphs 7.10 to 7.12 of your report packs. The design code also highlights a number of design objectives for the future primary school. While these will be matters led by the County Council as education authority, they are highlighted in order to ensure that design approaches do not undermine their position as a key destination and seek to ensure that the school is developed to be legible and responsive to its surroundings. So moving on to green infrastructure. Chapter 4 of the code sets out the strategy and approach to green infrastructure within Key Phase 2 and includes formal and informal open space, planting, biodiversity, ecology corridors and future parks. The overarching strategy is landscape-led, nature-first approach to deliver green infrastructure, delivering a mosaic of connected green spaces across the site. So just to run you through a couple of examples from the code. So the community gardens, greenways on the left, these form productive landscape corridors that run east-west through Key Phase 2. They include raised planters, community growing areas, orchards, together with a 3-metre wide footpath cycle track. The design guidance for the greenways is split into 2 sections, and that's done deliberately to respond to the specific requirements of the primary school boundary and the residential interfaces. So the cross section on the left shows a minimum 4-metre wide landscape buffer along the northern edge of the primary school. The primary greenway corridor on the right provides a continuation of the green spine that runs north-south through Key Phase 1. This forms a key movement corridor, including the primary street, 3-metre wide footpath cycleways, swales, 7 to 18 metre wildlife corridors and play features. The regulatory plan shows the greenway corridor will vary along its length to respond to the site conditions to create intervals containing play on the way, activity and rest opportunities within those spaces. So this is a civic green. This sits at the heart of Key Phase 2, plays an important role as a destination parkland, movement intersection and setting to the primary school and local facilities. This will comprise an open parkland to provide flexible space for a range of community-focused activities with a combined leap, neep, leisure routes, swales and informal open space. So Chapter 5 of the code sets out the site-wide approach to movement across all modes, and a hierarchy of street types are proposed from the main primary streets. These are shown in red and blue. And the village street, this is shown in teal, which curves round towards the left-hand side. These form a continuation of the primary street network in Key Phase 1. The plan here also sets out the smaller tertiary streets. These are shown by the orange dashed lines within the parcels. The code sets out design guidance for each street type, with tables providing design details and technical requirements and accompanying street section drawings that illustrate the form of the street. I'll show you a couple here. So the north-south primary street is sits adjacent to the primary greenway, which runs through the site. It's broken up into 2 street types. This comprises a 6.1 metre wide carriageway, 3 metre wide footpath cycleways on both sides of the street, and a 3 metre wide verge on the east side. Street type A1 to the north, which is outlined in red, it's to the north and to the south of the central civic green. Permits direct frontage access to units on the eastern side of the street with shared driveways on the western side. This was quite important during the course of the discussions on the code to reduce the requirement for rear parking courts within the adjacent parcels. Whereas street type A2, which is the blue one, this is centred solely on the civic green, does not allow shared driveways, and that's in order to maintain a consistent building line and maximise active frontage to the central green space. The plan on the left overlays the building heights parameter plan onto Key Phase 2 and illustrates a gradual decrease in height as the development moves east towards the A428. Taller 2 to 4 storey development with maximum height of 15 metres is permitted fronting the western edge with the formal sports hub and the railway line and surrounding the central civic green space as well. You see that by the darker red shading. Similarly, the building density plan on the right hand side shows an increase in density in the north and west and surrounding the central civic green, whereas parcels to the east and along the southern brook corridor will have the lowest site densities. Key Phase 2 includes 2 character areas. The Western Village character area comprises a formal arrangement of higher density apartments, terraces and semi-detached units. Units are typically 2 to 3 stories with an occasional 4 stories, whereas the Eastern Village character area comprises a more informal arrangement of lower density units that are typically 2 stories with the occasional 2.5 and 3 story unit for marker buildings and key corners. The code identifies 7 frontage characters, which refers to the relationship between the fronts of dwellings and the adjacent street or open space. These have been developed according to their location, and the image on the left shows how these have been grouped into 3 categories based on their formality. A summary of each frontage character is included in paragraph 7.40 of your report packs. So this is just an example here. So each frontage character includes a double-page spread of mandatory requirements and illustrations, setting out the position and spacing between buildings, the edge planting, the plot components, including the building typology, parking arrangements, frontage boundary treatments, building setback and materials. The example on this slide is of the primary street frontage character. This comprises primarily semi-detached and linked detached house types with a consistent, nearly continuous formal building line and spacing, with front access parking types, formal railings and hedges to front boundaries, and a range of buff and multi-buff facing brickwork. 2 additional residential interfaces are also identified in the code. So the first is to the primary school interface, which requires courtyard arrangements with individual units that either back onto or side on to the boundary with the school. This is done in order that the primary aspect is away from that school boundary. The sports hub interface requires dwellings to be located a minimum of 30 metres from the sports provision in accordance with Sports England guidance, with a landscape buffer between units and the car park for that area, and a minimum of 5 metre separation between the car park and the playing pitches. The code also sets out requirements for non-spatial components. These are listed on this slide. Just an example, so the top image is the mandatory design principles for parking courts, so setting out requirements for surface treatments, boundary treatments, soft landscaping and surveillance. The bottom left image, it shows how PVs should be integrated. PVs and photovoltaic should be integrated, so they do not comprise the visual quality of the dwellings and the street scene. And the bottom right image is showing the detailed requirements for windows to ensure that these are well designed and consistent across all elevations. So I'll hand you back to Laura now.
Thank you, Matt. So this application is recommended for approval as per section 9 of the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that report. And there are no speakers for this item, so we're going to move on to questions of clarification for our officers. Any questions? Yep, Councillor Niche.
You'll find my button now. Can I just say it's much easier when you look at it in colour. so thanks for that, because we're going through. In some of the road aspects, I'm guessing, only because I've seen it in Alconbury, so I'm asking you here specifically, is where the roads seem to intersect with pedestrian crossings. Is that raised areas, which seem to be on there? I couldn't quite work it out on here. So where they seem to come across, there seems to be raised bits. Is it raised, or are we just allowing the road streets to go through on a smooth run?
I mean, the exact detail of those crossing points would be covered as part of future reserve matters for grey and green infrastructure. However, the idea is that they would be some form of pedestrian priority at those crossing points, at least to demarcate that there is a pedestrian crossing there. So yeah, it would use similar approach as taken in Key Phase 1 as well, where you've got areas of block paving over crossings.
Any other questions of clarification? Nope. So we're going to move on to our debate. Would anyone like to start off the debate? Councillor Wakeford. Oh, Councillor Wakeford.
I think we were trying to volunteer each other. I'm going to hazard a wild guess that quite a lot of work has gone into what's behind the document before us this evening. I mean, as Councillor Niche intimated, there are all sorts of points of detail I'm sure we'd be fascinated to dig into and ask about and see as reserved applications come through. But in terms of what's before us, I have absolutely no concerns about supporting this, and subject to furious head nods around the table, I'm happy to go ahead and propose adoption.
Thank you. And Councillor Sanderson?
Thank you, Chair. This seems very straightforward, but I suspect a lot of, as Councillor Wakeford said, a lot of hard work has taken place in the background to this to get us to this point. And I think the presentations were very helpful, just clarifying what we're looking at here. So if Councillor Wakeford has proposed approval, I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gorson?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to continue what everyone else is saying. I've seen a number of these big sites, and really and truly, I think some areas could learn from what the officers have put together here. It is actually designing a place that is a wonderful place to live, and how they put in the spaces and still getting the developers to give that amount of spacing when you compare to other areas. I think it's a pat on the back to yourselves of how we've managed to get this and still keep the developers on board. We've mentioned about Alconbury Weald, but this park itself is so fantastic as well. It really is a good site to be. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to contribute? Okay, we're going to go for our proposal from Councillor Wakeford and seconder from Councillor Sanderson. And we go. All those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's approved.
Yep, that's carried then. Thank you. So move on to, let everyone in first. So we're going to move on to our next item, which is 3B Abbottsley, and we're going to hear a report from our planning officer, Hannah Guy.
Good evening, members, and thank you very much, Chair. So this is an application for the erection of a solar farm with associated substations and other supporting infrastructure, including a battery storage area, inverters, transformers, fencing, CCTV, landscaping, and the installation of an underground high voltage cable within the public highway. The location of the solar farm is at land at Northfield Farm near Croxton, and the application is before members this evening as both Abbottsley and Croxton Parish Council raised formal concerns to the development, and they are covered already in the written report. The slide here sets the site in context, and it shows the location of the site. The slide demonstrates that the site sits in the area west of the village of Croxton. The site has minimal constraints. There is a listed building to the centre of the site. Members might see that there it's the pink dot, and it's Northbound Farm. There are a number of public rights of way in the locality, and public right of way number 8 runs directly through the middle of the site. There is a scheduled ancient monument at Weald, and that's shown as the red hatched area. And also a mention must be given to the Croxton Park and Gardens, which is actually in South Cambs district. Also to note is the line of the new road, which is under construction to the directly north of the site and adjacent to it. And it's also noteworthy that the proposed east-west rail link has safeguarded land in this area, again to the north of the site. As members can see here in this slide, the majority of the site and development sits within the Hunts District Council authority area. But you can see that the cable for the connection to the national grid, which will be laid along Cambridge Road, and it will lead into South Cambs and then pop back into Hunts District Council to the north of the site towards the battery storage area and connection point. The applicant has confirmed that a separate application will be made for this cable element to South Cambs in due course. So this slide shows that it's located in the countryside and is relatively flat. The slide identifies the public footpath. I don't know if the members can see that, the dotted red line going through the centre of the site, and then from east to west, and then the north to south public bridle way right onto the left-hand side. You can also see that the cable connection for the national grid will be laid along Cambridge Road. And that leads to the high voltage power lines that are there to the north, passing through where the BESS area is in the square. This slide shows the site and its classification for agricultural land. As members can see that it's a mixture of grade 2, which is the light blue, grade 3A, which is dark green, and grade 3B, which is light green. In accordance with the agricultural land classification, it is therefore classed as the best and most versatile land, often referred to as BMV. In your written report before you, on page 66, it concludes that Cambridgeshire has an abundance of BMV. In this context, the site is predominantly grade 3A, which is a lower value than the average across the whole of Cambridgeshire, and by virtue of Huntingdonshire, it has a high percentage of 1 and 2 land overall. So therefore, policy LP10 seeks to avoid the irreversible loss of this BMV land. The report will conclude and shows that in this application, the proposal is for a 35-year period, and any hard-standing panels and buildings can be removed and the farming activities reinstated. And at the same time, any access tracks and fencing. Officers therefore note the development will not result in an irreversible or permanent loss of best and most versatile land by virtue of this and by virtue of its time limit and an end of life restoration plan. And these can both be secured by the recommended planning conditions. This slide shows the ecological makeup of the area and the increase in BNG that can be achieved. Members will note that the scheme provides an upwards of the mandatory 10% gain. There are some ecological interests in the area with a number of ponds with newts, and these will be mitigated by the applicant applying for a district newt licence. Ground nesting birds have also been identified, and these will be mitigated with a separate skylark plan, and both will be controlled by condition. We now move on to the next two slides, which show the development proposal and its layout. The plan shows the location of the equipment needed for the development, and the battery storage area is up on the left-hand side. This is in the northeastern corner, and the northern part of the development with the panels and the equipment. Within the site, there are a number of tracks, and they'll be laid to access the panels for maintenance and upkeep. This slide shows the southern part of the site. The development will have two accesses taken from Cambridge Road. Cambridge Road there. One will lead to the north and one will lead to the south to the larger section. And again, the access track to the panels will be laid down and hard surfaced. Moving on to the detail of the physical construction of the site, the following set of slides show some of the buildings and the panels. The panels are to be no more than 3.4 metres in height, and they'll be set at a gradient of between 15 and 30 degrees. This is to best capture the solar arrays. The panels will be laid out in rows, and approximately 6 panels will fit together to form a section. This slide shows the design and elevations of a substation building. And this slide shows an inverter container, and they look very similar to shipping containers. So this slide here, this plan shows that there's a proposed landscaping strategy for the site. The site area already contains well-established vegetation with hedging, some small areas of woodland and clumps of trees. All of these are proposed to be retained and enhanced. Formal and detailed plans of the proposed enhancements based around this plan will be secured by the planning condition. So moving now to a couple of photos of the site. So this is at point A up in the top right-hand corner, looking towards the Bess area on Toseland Road. Here's point B, and this is standing within the site, looking towards the care home. One here from point C, this is looking west over the site, and the village of Croxton is behind the photograph taker. And then finally, point D, this is down in the bottom left-hand corner by public right-of-way 8, looking into the site. So to conclude, the application process has taken all material considerations into account, and the proposed development is considered to be in line with national and local plan policy and is therefore acceptable. The report recommends approval of full planning permission subject to a number of planning conditions outlined in the report. Many thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much for that report. We have one speaker for this item, and it's the applicant, Rob Chamberlain. Would you like to approach the mic? So you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. If you press the middle button when you're ready to start. Thank you.
All right, you hear me then? Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. My name is Robert Chamberlain. I'm a development project manager at Voltalia UK. This is our Northfield solar project. It's a 50 megawatt solar farm with battery energy storage connecting into an existing overhead line at Toseland Road. We have capacity secured at this location, and subject to your approval, the project can be built and energised as early as autumn next year. This would make a significant and early contribution towards Huntingdonshire's climate goals and provide a reliable source of low carbon and low cost electricity for British homes and businesses. We went through a rigorous site selection process before bringing this site forward and have worked extensively with National Highways to design the project around the new A428. The solar fields benefit from existing screening, and we've provided a comprehensive package of new landscaping. This includes the restoration of historic field boundaries with new native hedgerows, extensive new woodland planting and species-rich grassland throughout. The landscaping scheme was developed in consultation with your officers, who consider it responds positively to the local landscape character and minimise potential visual impacts. The planting will also boost biodiversity and promote local ecosystem health, with a biodiversity gain of 80%. In terms of agricultural land, these fields represent some of the poorer quality land in the district and some of the poorest performing land on the farm. The northern field has also effectively been severed by the new A428, which makes it difficult to farm efficiently, and the southernmost field is poorly drained and unproductive. As you will be aware, UK farmers are facing a range of pressures, from unpredictable weather driven by climate change to more recent changes in environmental subsidies. Generating a consistent income from these fields helps to diversify the wider business and in turn secure the agricultural production across the rest of the farm. Resting these fields for a temporary period will also improve soil structure and soil health and increase its productivity for future use. A comprehensive decommissioning plan is proposed to be secured by condition, ensuring full agricultural production can be resumed quickly when the solar farm is removed. As set out by your officer in her report, the proposals are consistent with energy and planning policy, and we've accepted a range of conditions to secure mitigation and enhancement. This includes measures to safeguard and better reveal local archaeology, improvements to public footpaths, and management plans to cover construction. We look forward to continuing our engagement with all local stakeholders going forward and to launching our Community Benefit Fund to invest in local projects and initiatives. I'd just like to finish by thanking your planning officer for a clear recommendation and for working so constructively with us during the determination. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to ask any questions for our speaker tonight? We don't have any questions, so you may sit down. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to questions of clarifications from our planning officers. Anyone like to ask any questions? Yep. Councillor McAdam, please.
Thank you. with respect to the time of the site being used, I believe 35 years in this case, what is the possibility or for them to come back in 35 years and want another 35 years? Are they allowed to do that, put in planning permission for another 35 years?
35 years is a long time, and yes, we are here to consider what's in front of us, and the planning statement and the application forms all say 35 years. So that's the determination on the 35 years at present.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. It's just referring to 511 with South Cambs District Council. I just wonder if you could expand how we deal with the fact that this one is in ours, but obviously we've got an issue from South Cambs, and then of course there's potential. I think you said potential of an application going into South Cambs. I can't remember if you said it was actually happening or going there. And it's just that point of impact of it's like one big site, yet we're looking at it in two smaller chunks. And how do we deal with that from a South Cambs to local authority perspectives? Thank you.
So the applicant has confirmed that they will be putting an application to South Cambs. That hasn't happened yet. So yes, that will be forthcoming. As a neighbouring authority, I look to you, Clara, we would be consulted as a neighbour. So we would be able to have our input into their application, similarly to they've been allowed to have their input into our application. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. And Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, Hannah, if you could walk us through the question of the grade of the land at 7.2. I know you did mention that in your presentation, because that seems to be the main reason for the parish objecting here. So it's, I think in the report it says it's not the best, most versatile land. It's not BMV land, but there's some mixture, isn't there, of grade 2, 3A and 3B?
So best and most versatile land are classed as 1, 2 and 3, and then 3 grade is classed into A and B land. So 3A land is best and most versatile, 3B is not. In terms of this site, we have, as we saw, a mixture of all of those. So in terms of the site itself, in the classification of Cambridgeshire as a whole, and by virtue of Huntingdonshire being part of that, Cambridgeshire has a very, very high volume of 1 and 2 grade land. So we considered the classification as not, it is best and most versatile land, but of the lower grade of the 3A and 3B. Obviously there is 2 in there also. In terms of the irreversible and irreplaceable loss of best and most versatile land, we don't consider that would be the case by virtue of the time limit of the site and the fact that the removal of the solar arrays, the paraphernalia and the buildings and tracks, that land could return back to agricultural use. So that's a quick.
Any more questions? Councillor Wickford.
Thank you. It's obviously disappointing we haven't got either parish council with us, but to answer questions in terms of their objections, as they are the reason that this is before us, from how I interpret the papers, but just seeking to review details of their objections. Croxton Parish Council appears to have made reference to suggesting archaeological investigations were inadequate, and this has not fully discharged duties to proceed with planning permission. As I understand the report with respect to input from county as well as Historic England, my understanding of that is that the clear advice from officers, including the condition in the paper, is that that concern is addressed, but as there was a specific claim there, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to clarify that for us, please.
Absolutely, thank you for that. I have, yes, consulted heavily with Chet, the Cambridge Historical Trust, and the applicant has done all of the required field work, trenching and evaluation. They have, excuse me, they have even gone to the point of moving during the application process, moving some of the panel areas to not have so much impact on the archaeological features in the site. There are areas of buffers to the scheduled ancient monument, and we have a reply from Chet of no objections, subject to sort of further written schemes of investigation to be submitted. They are very comfortable and happy with that condition wording.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
There are no more questions of clarifications. We're going to move over to the discussion. So would anyone like to start the discussion? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I think just past the discussion thing, I mean, the concern I have with is the number that are coming through. And I know we're looking at a specific, but it's the quantity that seem to be coming through. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but this is specifically on this one as well, is that we're losing land which is not particularly productive. Well, actually, I think that's the wrong way of looking at it, because actually it is productive. It's just not in necessarily the right way. So I do have concerns in general terms of actually, paving over in the wrong word in larger numbers of farmland like this. The benefit, of course, is fairly substantial in that, there's in one aspect, when it's bright and sunny like it was the last couple of weeks, it'll be brilliant. Unfortunately, it's obviously not that sustainable in this country, but overall, there's some benefits there. So I do have a difficult balance sometimes when we're losing agricultural farmland, which is irreplaceable to one aspect. But yes, when we're saying in 35 years' time, they replace it back, the likelihood is, who knows? None of us are going to know till 35 years' time. Farmers who've actually sold their land and then want to take it back again, I think will be quite a difficult one. But in my mind, I find a difficult balance on some of these, because I know obviously from the perspective we should be not forcing ourselves, but going down these routes. But I think we do lose a little bit of traction sometimes in some of the stuff that we're actually losing on it. So I just leave it at that at the moment, but I'm sure others can persuade otherwise.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. As Councillor Niche drew attention to, that there's obviously always complexity in these sorts of applications and this level of scale. In particular, there are sort of interesting broader policy points for people who aren't us and national government that one could sort of take from elements of I think observation there. But in terms of the sort of framework we're working in, of course, and how we need to consider the application before us. As an application on this scale goes, I hesitate to say, but this one looks simpler than it might be. I've been looking very carefully at the potential grounds for refusal suggested to us in some of the objections, in particular around the two parish councils, Abbottsley and Croxton. I think, as Councillor Sanderson referenced in an earlier question, the concern about loss of the grade of land feels a substantial concern, which I think has been addressed really, really helpfully by officers, both in terms of how we should consider this land in the context of the availability of land in Cambridgeshire, and also the fact that it's not permanent loss. This is 35 years. Is a long time, but it's different to a permanent change of use of land, and from which there's no return, which a lot of the other construction projects that we consider planning permission for at this committee would fall into as a category. So I'm certainly interested to hear comments from around the table from others as well, but I certainly haven't picked up anything in the report that would make me wish to or feel there are defensible grounds for refusing this. So I'm minded to support this, but with an open mind, pending contributions from others.
Thank you. And Councillor Coulson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I look at this, and Councillor Wakeford has taken a lot of my speech in how he's looked at this. Yes, if this was a housing development, we've lost that land, and as we keep talking, 35 years is a long time. However, everything moves on, and there might be a change in how we gather our supply further down the line, and whether that's 35 years, 25 years, or even 10 years away. But we still have that land would be freely back available, either as agricultural or whatever the next stage will be. I've looked through this. Yes, it does sound as if it's a very large and complex site. There's talk about how far away the cable is going to lose some of the power, etc., etc. But I do believe it's the right thing to do at this time. We do need power for the housing that we are going to supply down the line. And to that end, if you're willing to accept, I will propose acceptance on this proposition.
Thank you. And Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you'll not be surprised that I don't really go for this. In our plan, we state that we should not use the best, most versatile land for this sort of project. And here we are doing, there's quite a big chunk of it that is grade 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 3. We've already lost a fair chunk, not far away at Wintringham Park, which is, I don't know the grade of that, but that is a large area. And in times like this, food security must be considered. This basically could go anywhere. It could go on grade 3B land. It doesn't have to be there. It straddles a road, which is not really ideal in my mind anyway. So, and I don't accept, as the officers said, you know, we've got a lot of grade 1 and 2 in Cambridgeshire. Yes, we have. That doesn't mean to say we've got to take more out just because we've got a lot. So I don't agree with that that comment, Chairman. So no, I won't be voting for it, I don't think. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Pitt.
Thanks. Interesting debate. So for me, that energy security versus food security versus the need for housing, these are all really relevant issues, but they're relevant issues for Parliament probably. And what we've got here is an application about, is this policy compliant? So parking my views about the best mix of the way we use the land on a sort of a strategic level nationally, for me, this adds up. I think that officers' arguments are watertight. I can understand some of the objections that have been made and I can sympathise with them, but I think a lot of those have been addressed. I can't see any that I feel that are left hanging and without an appropriate response. So I'm happy to second this application.
Would anyone else like to contribute to the discussion before we move on to our first proposer, Councillor Wakeford, and our seconder? Sorry, Councillor Gorson, apologies, and Councillor Pitt as a seconder. So we're going to move on to a vote now. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you. So that's carried. Okay, now we're going to move on to our item 4A, which will be presented by our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson, and it's regarding Holywell cum Needingworth.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So this application was referred at March DMC to enable Environmental Health Officer, Claire, who's to my right, to attend tonight to provide clarification and answer questions from members on odour-related matters. This application is being brought back to committee to be heard in full, so I'll go through the presentation again in full and we'll hear from speakers as well. So this application seeks plan permission for up to 30 affordable dwellings to include public open space, landscaping, access and associated works. Approval is sought for access to Overcoat Lane only at this stage, layout, landscaping, scale and appearance as reserved matters. So you can see the site in front of you outlined in red, shows the extent of the application site boundary, 1.39 hectare, about rectangle piece of grade 2 agricultural land on the eastern edge of the built up area of Needingworth. You can see there's existing residential development to the north and west of the site. To the east of the site is the wider agricultural field, beyond which is the Overcoat Farm intensive poultry rearing unit, approximately 120 metres east of the application site. Opposite that is the water treatment works, and to the south is the Lodal Farm. So the aerial imagery just kind of gives you a bit more context, but you can see the mouse is going to move. So you can see there's the chicken farm. North of that, you've got sewage works, and obviously you can see the site with the residential development to the north and west, and then Lodal Farm to the south of the application site. So, as mentioned, this application seeks outline permission for the erection up to 30 dwellings with all matters reserved apart from access. Dwelling mix has not been prescribed at this stage, being deferred as a reserved matter. Matters of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping would also be determined at reserved matters stage. The proposal is for 100% of the dwellings to be affordable for either rent or shared ownership, with the applicant offering additional flexibility to incorporate first homes if required. This application seeks to respond to a shortfall of affordable housing at the national and district-wide level. Vehicle access to the site would be via a new priority junction to be formed in Overcoat Lane, approval for which is sought within the application. So you can just see that at the north of the site. The proposal also includes a 2-metre footway into the site and a new footway extending westwards on the southern side of Overcoat Lane, providing a connection to the main village. Just here you can see a zoomed in version and access plan. And if you can just make out on the kind of the red dotted line, pink bit is the extension to the footway to the site, linking it to the rest of the village. So principal development, in terms of the principal, paragraph 7.6, 7.8 of the March DMC report sets out the council's house and land supply position. As a result of this, presumption of favour of sustainable development, also referred to as tilted balance, is engaged in accordance with paragraph 11D and footnote 8 of the NPPF for applications involving the provision of housing. Essentially what this means is that local plan policies concerned with the supply and location of housing as set out in the development strategy chapter considered to be out of date and can no longer be afforded full weight in the determination of planning applications. This includes policies LP2, LP9, LP10, which are all relevant to this application. To be clear, the application is still being assessed against these policies, but reduced weight is given, which I'll address later when discussing the plan and balance. So I'm just going to run through some photos just for a bit more context of the site. So on the screen in front, you've got views looking to the east from Overcoat Lane, so that's towards the chicken farm. The site is just on your right-hand side, just out of view. The next set of views are looking east from the western boundary of the site. So you can just see again on the right-hand side, the chicken farm in the background. These are views looking to the south and east from the rear corner of the site. Views looking to the northeast. Views looking west on Overcoat Lane, so you can see this is looking back towards Needhamworth. You've got the properties on the right-hand side, which sit north of Overcoat Lane, and then you've got the site to your left, and you can see further development within Needhamworth in the background towards the left-hand side of that photo. You've got a view looking southwest from Overcoat Lane, so this just includes a bit more of the site, and you can see again in the background Needhamworth, and also you've got Lodall Farm to the left of that. So just going on through the key issues, given the visual and functional relationship to the built-up area, the site is considered to be well related to the built-up area, but it is acknowledged that visually it would appear as part of the countryside and views looking east. Paragraph 7.24 of the March DMC report sets out there is conflict with policy LP10, as the proposal would result in irreversible loss of Grade 2 agricultural lands, and it would partially erode the existing well-defined edge in Needhamworth's country setting of arable fields. However, it is considered that the site is sustainable for the amount of development proposed. The future occupiers would have access to services and facilities within Needhamworth, including a convenience store, post office, preschools, primary school, pubs, place of worship, and a village hall. There's also means to access larger settlements, including St Ives and Hunston, by sustainable modes of transport, including bus service and also cycle path. In terms of highway safety, means of access is for consideration at this time. The Highway Authority has no objection to the proposed development or the proposed access and recommends support subject to conditions. I think the main issue tonight, and obviously the reason why this application has been deferred, is the fact that the application site is in close proximity to an existing intensive poultry farm and the sewage treatment works. As set out in the report, the agent of change policy of the NPPF has been considered in terms of relationships to the poultry farm, including the redevelopment of that poultry farm intensification. The agent of change policy seeks to ensure that existing businesses and facilities would not have unreasonable restrictions placed on them as a result of the development permitted after they were established. So the applicant's odour assessment sets out that in some weather conditions and during some activities on the poultry farm, it is likely to be odour detectable at the proposed dwellings. However, the environmental health team does not consider this warrants an objection or a reason for refusal. The EA have also raised no objection. The agent of change policy is not considered to be engaged, as the odour sources would not have a significant adverse impact on future occupiers. As set out in the late rep summary, the submitted odour assessment was carried out prior to the redevelopment of the farm, which is under construction, and is therefore recommended that an updated odour assessment be undertaken and secured by way of condition to inform the layout of the proposed development and any mitigation required. It's worth noting the Minerals and Waste team at Cambridgeshire County Council raised no objection to the proximity of the development to the Needhamworth Recycling Centre. I'll just kind of go over these later reps quite quickly because we looked at these previously and they're in the report. But you can see there that we had some additional comments from Needhamworth Parish Council, 2 further neighbour reps and Anglian Water comments. Since the publishing of this report for this DMC, we've had further representations from the chicken farm, who have commissioned an odour peer review. This includes a review of the odour assessment submitted within the application, as well as a review of the results summary of the odour assessment produced in support of the planned application for the poultry farm expansion. This document was reviewed by the Environmental Health Officer and the officer recommendation remains the same. 2 further reps have been received by 18 Overcoat Lane in relation to potential risks associated with inhabitants living near 2 chicken farms and the expansion of the chicken farm. Similar concerns have been raised previously and are addressed in the officer report. Both reps are available on the application file to view. So the plan and balance exercise. As outlined, the presumption in favour of sustainable development is contained within paragraph 11D of the NPPF. This states where the most relevant local plan policies for determining application are out of date, plan permission should be granted. The exceptions are where proposals in a protected area, none of which are relevant to this application, or where the harms caused by the proposed development significantly and demonstrably outweigh its benefits. Put simply, the tilted balance weighs the development's adverse impacts against its benefits, not on a level playing field, but tilted towards granting planning permission. Members are reminded to read the report as a whole. The planning balance exercise requires decision makers to assign various degrees of weight to the harms and benefits, which is set out from paragraph 7.82 of the officer report. So then just looking at the balance we've got in front of us tonight. So on the right-hand side, you've got the harm. So you've got loss of grade 2 agricultural land. Obviously, there is some conflict there with policy LP10. However, acknowledging that the site represents a relatively small area in relation to the extent of the district's most fertile land, and the development would not prevent the farming of the wider agricultural fields. The impact on the landscape and countryside setting, again, further conflict at LP10. However, moving to the benefits, you've got the delivery of 30 homes towards the housing supply. You've got 100% affordable housing, so that's 30 dwellings towards district and national needs. The application site is in a sustainable location. There's also further contributions to the economy through construction, and then the introduction of further residents within Needhamworth. You've got delivery of green space, and you've also got biodiversity net gain. So the officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to the signing of Section 106 and the conditions outlined in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that report. We're going to move on to speakers for this item. I'm going to start with Councillor Andrew White from Holywell, Needhamworth Parish Council. Thank you. If you just switch on your mic when you're ready to start, thank you. You've got 3 minutes.
We stand by all of our objections to this proposal and will add the following. NPPF briefing, February 2025, para 232 states policies should not be considered out of date and due weight should be given to them. And it may be easier, even when tilted balance is engaged, to refuse applications that are poorly located or designed. NPPF Chapter 12, para 135, achieving well-designed places, create places that are safe, inclusive and accessible, which promote health and well-being. The DMC officer suggested measures to mitigate odour by restricting times and location of windows. This is far from promoting health and well-being, and smells do not respect such matters. Hopefully members have read the report from Redmore Environmental, which updates the harm of odour to significance in accordance with IAQM guidance. This application is in breach of the following. LP6 policy states applications will not be supported if concerns are raised relating to the ability of wastewater infrastructure to accommodate wastewater. Angler Water has objected to this development. LP9, smaller settlement. Needhamworth is a smaller settlement. This site is not within the built-up area of Needhamworth, nor is it well related to the built-up area, and is 5 kilometres to St Ives Town Centre. LP10 Countryside. This site is Grade 2 land, which is land of higher agricultural value. This development will project into the countryside, and this proposed change from arable field to a residential suburban cul-de-sac will change the intrinsic rural character of the site, and the setting of the village would be harmfully disrupted by the proposed housing. There has been 58 letters of objections to this development, which 22 relate to smells, noise and dust from the chicken farm. The refurbished chicken farm is yet to be commissioned, so no one can say what the impact will have on the proposed development. For us that live in the village, we are better placed than the officers to know the issues associated with living in the countryside. Tilted balance is not an excuse to agree to unsustainable development, and the Parish Council asks members to reject this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And any questions for our speaker tonight? We don't have any questions. You may sit down. Thank you. And our next speaker is the agent, Andy Brand. Would you like? Thank you. And you've got 3 minutes. And if you just press the button to start. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, thank you and good evening, councillors and officers. My name is Andy Brand. I'm the planning agent here before you today on behalf of the landowner. Excuse me. I spoke at the committee meeting last month when this item was considered. I'm going to repeat some of my previous speech to you, but we'll focus on odour matters. It does remain the case that you have a full, comprehensive and thorough committee report before you, which confirms the proposal as an acceptable and sustainable form of development. In particular, the proposal will make a welcome contribution towards the housing needs of Huntingdonshire. It provides that all of the 30 new homes will be delivered as affordable housing. And I can again confirm that Accent Housing are working with the landowner to deliver the site in the near term. The position with regard to odour matters has been considered comprehensive in the committee report, and the council's expert, who is here today, agrees with our odour consultant that the impacts from odour are acceptable. Since the previous meeting, an objector has submitted a peer review document, and having reviewed that, the council expert remains of the view that there is no odour related objection to the planning application. It is important to remember here that the objector, who spoke at committee last month but is not here tonight, has not provided a contrary odour assessment. That is not what the peer review is. All the peer review does is critique the work that has been undertaken and found acceptable by the council's expert. The peer review suggests that adverse impacts might occur at the development. It doesn't confirm they will. Planning decisions have to be taken on the basis of facts and evidence, and the facts and evidence have been found to be acceptable here by the council's expert. I have to say it remains unclear to me why the objection has been made, as with their planning application for the recently constructed chicken sheds, the objector was at pains to identify that the odour impacts were acceptable at nearby existing properties. As confirmed by the late representations report produced for the March Planning Committee, those existing properties are at similar distances to those proposed within this planning application. It can be seen from the site layout plan that the existing bungalow at 48 Overcoat Lane is further east than any of the proposed dwellings. It remains fair and reasonable to continue to conclude that the objection is inconsistent with the previous objector's case. In any event, though, the recommendation before you today includes a condition to consider odour matters at reserved matters stage. To sum up, the proposal before you today has been rigorously assessed by the council and the statutory consultees. Changes have been made to the quantum and layout of the proposal, indicatively, to reflect advice from the council's officers, and there are no outstanding objections on technical or environmental grounds from relevant consultees which cannot be resolved by planning conditions. The proposal, therefore, provides a sustainable development opportunity to deliver much needed new homes. I therefore urge you to agree with the recommendation before you today and resolve to grant outline planning permission to enable Accent to deliver 30 new affordable homes. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Is there any questions for our speaker tonight? Councillor Pitt?
Thank you. This might be a question for our officers, but while you're here, I'll put it to you as well. So you mentioned about mitigation for odour will be dealt with at reserved matters. Can you help me understand what that might involve? So where I'm confused is I can understand how you mitigate for sound using some sort of baffle, but my layman's understanding of odours is they're going to go wherever they want to go. So can you provide a bit more information about what we might expect at that reserved matters that will be able to mitigate odour issues?
I can respond as far as I can. I think, as you said, it's probably equally a question for the environmental health officer. The design and layout of the properties can be designed so that habitable rooms are not facing in the direction of the to east effectively onto the chicken sheds. We've already designed in terms of the layout, keeping the properties as further away from that boundary as we can. So it's areas around that which I'd have thought are the key principles.
Any more questions for our speaker? Nope. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we're going to move on to questions of clarification from our officers. Councillor Corney?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Lewis, do your report. I just, might have misheard, but just to sort of find out, did you say one of the planning conditions would be a revisited odour report? It's just not the reason I ask is just looking through the conditions, and within the report, it doesn't state that. So I may have heard wrong, but that's what I heard from you during your report.
For you, Chair. So on the report that was put to members for the April DMC, you'll see on the conditions, I want to say it's 6.1 down, submission of the updated odour assessment as part of any reserved matters for layout. So it's just to make sure then we've got an updated situation that whether dwellings need to be moved further away. I think it's worth noting that the description is up to 30 dwellings. So it doesn't mean it has to be 30. If odour means that it requires more of a buffer. I think you might be looking at the March DMC report, which is attached as an appendice. If we look at the April one and just scroll down just where it says recommendation, it's the 6th bullet point.
If I may, it's page 94 of our pack.
Apologies. Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. It's an earlier one. This is because it came about in the late reps report last time. So it wasn't in the original committee report, but following discussion with environmental health officers on the late reps, so it's now being included within the conditions. But yeah, it basically it means that we have an opportunity to assess that, whether 30 dwellings is an appropriate number or whether require a further buffers needed, where windows need to be located, etc.
Thank you. Yeah, my apologies for that. That makes, obviously sort of so much to go through, isn't it? But so just as a follow-up question on that then, really, when are we predicting that will happen? Because at the moment, obviously we know at the moment the chicken farm's not commissioned, so it's just, and this was part of the debate that we had previously, I think, wasn't it, about how far that can be sort of put back.
So I think, to be clear, that condition is attached to outline consent. So if members are minded to approve the application tonight, then in terms of the principle of development of residential development on the site, it being acceptable in terms of odour, that would be ticked off, I would say. When we get to then a reserved matter stage, you can't go back over those principal issues because we've established principle development. That odour assessment would just be purely there to inform the layout, whether less than 30 dwellings is more appropriate, where windows need to be, so habitable windows. So you may have them facing west, for example. So it's just some type of mitigation. Obviously, to be very clear, what you're looking at tonight is the principal development, and that includes odour. So once outline consent is granted, it's considered residential development is acceptable on that site. The thing you can control at reserved matters stage is the quantum of development. So you can't, whether less than 30 dwellings is acceptable, and in the detailed layout stage.
Councillor Golson and then Councillor Niche, please.
I think if you can pass on to Councillor Niche, as mine has just been asked by Councillor Corney.
Okay, Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. It was just something that came up on LP6, water waste management, which we had an update from Anglia Water saying that they object to it. And actually it does, as far as I can see in here, when I'm looking at this one, unless it's an out-of-date one, it says water treatment capacity for any scale of development will be supported if Anglian Water Services do not raise concerns relating to stability, which they have done, haven't they? So obviously it doesn't, we're against that policy.
For you, Chair. So I think the key point there is Anglian Water are not saying it's not possible to upgrade the recycling centre. They're saying they haven't allocated funds to do so. So this is a similar issue that came up on the Hertford application back in January. And I think, to be clear, this is a funding issue. It's not a land planning issue. So in terms of it, a condition is recommended to secure details of foul water drainage scheme similar to the Hertford, but it's not a reason that we can prevent development going forwards. It's a matter for Anglian Water to resolve in terms of their business plan and long-term funding. But once so to put it kind of frank, is that once a development is granted plan permission, Anglian Water then has a duty to ensure that they have a connection to provide. So they're not saying they can't do it, they're just saying they haven't allocated funds to upgrade that at the current time. I think we're going to expect these kind of objections across a few developments coming forward. A lot of the recycling centres are at capacity, but yet the answer will remain the same, and we'll look to condition it each time.
Is that a follow-up question?
It is, yeah. I'm literally rustling through because I thought it said they object to the application. I can't see where it says it's because of this. They just object to it because they can't deal with it.
What I'm going to do is just share my screen because we've got a extract from the comments for Anglian Water. So just bear with me. So you can just see who's catching up. I don't know whether you can read that. Just need to also move something out of the way. I could zoom in actually. Let me just come out of presentation mode. It's a good shout. So you are correct. They are objecting. But I think the key part there, it says, which currently lacks the capacity to accommodate the additional flows. As going on, at present, so the last sentence of that first paragraph, at present, no funding has been allocated to the Water Recycling Centre. However, we may seek to promote investment through our future business plans. Anglian Water isn't saying it's not possible to upgrade it. They're just saying they haven't allocated any funds. Obviously, that's not a planning issue. That's a business issue, a funding issue for Anglian Water. So this is the same objection we had on that Hertford scheme in January DMC. So we'd look to apply a condition.
Yep. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I was also going to ask you to clarify the point about LP6 raised by the Parish Council, which Councillor Niche has beaten me to doing, which has been spelt out really helpfully. So I don't feel the need to recap my understanding of that. The other point I was keen to raise a question about was back on with the Councillor Pitt's question, or Councillor Gawson's, in terms of the scope of the conditioned further odour assessment. So officers have clarified for us that wouldn't be revisiting the principle of development, but it would be relevant to the site layout, which could entail revisiting the actual number of homes on the site, because it's not 30, it's up to 30. I was just keen to check my understanding then. As things stand, we've heard that there's a residential property at 48 Overcut Lane, which is already closer than any of the dwellings would be, even up to 30, to the chicken farm, but potentially a revised odour assessment, if it merited it on environmental health grounds, could require fewer houses than 30 in the proposed development. They could be further to the west again, so an even greater distance further from the chicken farm than existing properties in Needingworth. I think that's my understanding of the clarification about what the scope would be of the reserved matters odour assessment, but I'd be grateful to know if I've got that wrong or if there's anything further you'd like to underline on that.
So through you, Chair, I think kind of as these questions now moving into the more detailed odour discussion, it'd be a good point to bring in environmental health. The reason why I think this is a good time is that in order for us to recommend a condition, it's helpful for you to understand where officers are coming from in terms of why we think odour is acceptable on the site. And it's just to be clear, and Claire will come onto this later on, the reason why we're recommending that condition for an updated odour report is because, one, we haven't got that new chicken farm in operation yet. It's good practice to update. So same with noise. If we had a noise issue, you'd update it. As we know, it could be a couple of years before reserve matters comes forward and things can change. So in terms of good practice, when you've got kind of a technical issue such as odour or noise, even ecology, sometimes highways, you do get reports updated to inform layouts. But I'll bring in Claire Braybrook from Environmental Health. And what she's going to do is just run through kind of where officers have landed in terms of the odour assessment. I think if you have any burning questions as we go through, please just indicate and then we'll do our best to answer those. So I'll pass over.
Thank you, Lewis, and good evening, members. So as an overview, I would say the environmental assessment for the chicken farm expansion demonstrated that the new buildings will be state-of-the-art, modern, purpose-designed buildings with high-velocity fan outlets, which will be replacing the existing pour sheds. There'll be a new dirty water containment system and landscaping scheme around the boundary. The odour plume model for that application previously with the chicken farm shows improvements to the odour in the area, and that whilst the overall level of odour will increase slightly from the site, which is to be expected with the increase in the number of birds, the predicted odour levels would actually decrease at nearby receptors due to the improvement works. This would really be due to the higher extraction, which is extracted forcefully out as well, meaning more dispersion. The contained building means better control of odours. Currently, the assessment said that the buildings were in poor disrepair, so the odours are sort of emitting out of the gaps in the buildings. It's likely there'll be better atmospheric controls within the buildings and better control over the water for the birds, resulting in drier bedding and less odour. Better control measures over humidity and temperature as well, so less bacterial growth. I think the high risk activity from an odour point of view is likely to be the cleaning out activity of the sheds. Again, under the environmental permit, there should be control measures in place for this activity, and the changes on site should assist in ensuring the litter is less odorous. In line with the MPPF, we have to assume that the permitting regime will operate effectively, which will minimise pollution at source. And currently, from all the evidence that we have, we don't consider that the chicken farm will have a significant adverse effect on the proposed properties, and therefore we don't consider we have grounds to say that this would be an unacceptable use of the land. We do remain of the view that under some weather conditions and some site activities, there may be odour experienced at the properties. However, this should not be regular enough to be a significant impact. We have assessed the odour as a slight adverse effect, which is classed as not significant within the IAQM guidance. And that's mainly because we've got an existing activity which is undertaking works that will improve odour impact at receptors. It's located predominantly downwind of sensitive receptors, and we don't have evidence of a history of complaints. I know complaints were brought up previously, and obviously after the last committee where the parish council was saying about the number of complaints they received, I looked into that further, and I can tell you that we checked our complaint database back in March 2019 when the previous application came in. We had no records of any complaints for the 6 years prior to that. When the new application came in, we checked the system again, and no complaints were found. However, after the last committee meeting, I've interrogated our system quite significantly, trying numerous different parameters to search, and I have found one complaint regarding alleged odour from the chicken farm. That was received in March 2022. Officers didn't corroborate this, so we can't guarantee that the source of the odour was the chicken farm. However, the complainant was advised to contact the Environment Agency, as they are the regulator of the site, and any complaints regarding odour should go through to those. I have contacted the Environment Agency to ask if they have received any odour complaints regarding the site, and I received a response from them in February stating that there have not been any reported incidents to the Environment Agency concerning odour or noise at any other issue, from the site. I also spoke to the nuisance officer. Nuisance officers cover certain areas, and they quite often know if there's anything that is a concern in their area, and he wasn't concerned about, he hadn't had any issues with the with odour from the site. So we're basing our decision on the sniff tests, because we've got 2 sniff tests. We've got the modelling from the original chicken farm application. We've got the source receptor assessment, source pathway receptor, assessment, and also obviously the complaint database. So that's how we've reached our decision. Do you want me to cover mitigation? Burning question. So just to clarify, with regard to the clearing out activities that are the highest risk, obviously those only occur I think it's every 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 7 or 8 weeks. So that's sort of how frequently that may occur. And then obviously if the wind direction is the predominant wind direction, it should hopefully be taking the odour away from this development site. If you want me to cover mitigation, the condition would be to help advise the layout to ensure any potential odour impact is minimised as far as possible. Odour and air quality are more difficult to mitigate against compared to, say, noise, and most mitigation is best completed at source, which the Environment Agency permit would cover to ensure that the site are utilising appropriate measures to minimise all aspects of pollution as far as possible. With regard to the application site, a buffer would keep the properties further from the site, and landscaping can help mitigate odours through enhanced vertical mixing due to turbulence and odour particle fallout due to reduced wind speed. Orientation barriers can help to mix the air, and I've certainly heard of advice having openable windows or ventilation drawn in from facades that face away from pollution sources. A good layout can ensure the properties are suitably spaced to assist with dispersion and free air movement. It's basically anything that can increase dilution and dispersion of odorous pollutant plumes as it travels from the source to the receptor will help reduce the concentration at the receptor and therefore exposure.
I actually have a question. Can I go in? In relation to the complaints and the operation of the site, so how long has the site not been operating for as a chicken farm because of the refurbishments and stuff?
I don't know. I know we have had a complaint about the works that are happening on site, but I would say, I mean, obviously we received the one complaint we did receive was in March 2022, and we checked in March 2019, and there had been no complaints 6 years prior to that. So I'm fairly sure we haven't had a complaint in over 10 years from that site.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pitt?
Thank you for that. Preempting my question, so you've covered that really helpfully, and it does make sense, absolutely. So I was kind of coming into this. There will be a question coming, I promise. But I come into this thinking, well, actually, if you just don't have any windows on one side, you've maybe gained an extra 10 meters before the same air arrives at the other side of the house, and it's not a terribly promising sounding design of a building if you've got no openable windows on the side facing the open countryside. But that actually does make sense in terms of having kind of anything that mixes the air. And so thank you for that. So perhaps this is more of a question for our planning officers, but I think so my approach to thinking about this is that if you buy a house next to a motorway, you accept that you're buying a house that's got some noise, and that's kind of the way it goes. Obviously, with this case, it's slightly unusual in that we know that the chicken farm is going to be operational quite soon, but it's not at the moment. So it's all quite hypothetical. But I think you've covered that really well in terms of understanding where, how you got to that conclusion. So thank you. I think the one thing I feel slightly uncomfortable about this application still is that because it's affordable housing, it's less likely that the residents are going to choose to live there. They're probably going to be allocated a home. And, so therefore, if you don't accept that one, there has to be a good reason for it. And I'm nervous for the potential residents that may not have selected to live there and, end up in this place, in this development. And, for one reason or another, or specifically in terms of odour, end up regretting that. Now, I think there's no planning framework that accounts for that thought process that I've got, but I'm interested to know whether there's anything in planning regulation that supports the thought that I've had.
Thank you. And for you, Chair. So in terms of it is a tilted balance exercise here. So the weighting of the affordable provision is just one factor in the weighing up of the benefits. I wouldn't say it's the deciding factor. This scheme could have come forward with 40%. Would we then be in the same position? I think most likely. The provision of 30 homes towards the affordable. And yes, why we have identified some conflict with policies in terms of loss of agricultural land and impact on the countryside. To be clear, odour wasn't one of the harms identified because officers have come to the recommendation that odour is acceptable. So yes, in terms of it is 100% affordable, but it is a residential development. I think that's kind of to be mindful of that, the tilted balance. I think just kind of following on from Claire, and I might be jumping a bit ahead here, so apologies. I think it's just important to understand kind of where we as planners come from. So an application's been submitted, an odour assessment has been submitted in support of that by the applicant. We obviously got the Environmental Health Officer who has reviewed that. Yes, we have objections locally, and we obviously give them weight within the consideration. But the poultry farm hasn't submitted an odour assessment which contradicts the one submitted by the applicant. If anything, the poultry farm's own odour assessment for the redevelopment of that site confirms what the Environmental Health Officer and also the applicant's odour assessment says in terms of the impact would not be significant upon residential development. And we know that because there is a dwelling to the north, which is set closer to the site than the residential development. So obviously, there's a number of factors there. I think, obviously, we've heard from Environmental Health Officer how they've tackled it. As a planning officer weighing up these things, we obviously have to take into account that the redevelopment of that site is more controlled environment, better management. They will have an odour management in place. They've got the EA as well that they have to abide by. So taking it all into account, that's where we've ended up based on the information evidence submitted, listening also to the expert, that the odour is acceptable. So in terms of when we get to the mitigation, we've accepted that, yes, odour is acceptable, so residential development can be on the site. That condition around the mitigation is just there to inform the layout and to go that little bit further in terms of mitigation, but we've accepted the principle of development. So in terms of it, like Claire said, there are a number of things that can be done under mitigation, but we have to be mindful that if members are minded to approve this tonight, it's on the basis that we have then said odour is acceptable on the site, and that mitigation is purely down to layout. Like I said, there may be a reduction in numbers, the outline is up to 30, but it's good practice to make sure you get reports renewed when there's a time delay anyway. So and noting this application has been in for a while, for a couple of years. So by the time we get to development, a few more years have passed. So I think just to be clear where officers are coming from, planning officers, it's not only just weighing up the objections received, but looking at the evidence and the information submitted. Nothing has been submitted that contradicts the applicant's submitted odour assessment, to be clear. It's the own poultry farms redevelopment odour assessment which also aligns with it and says there would not be a significant impact. So I think members, when looking at this application, as we say, always read the report as a whole. You've got to weigh up the person or the main objector in terms of odour. They got planning permission to redevelop the site, and their own odour assessment says the impact would be acceptable on nearby residential properties.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you. Just to clear up one question, I think it's about a year it's not been in use, but that's give or take a few months. I suppose my question comes back just to clarify from the chicken manure, whatever they call it, guada, smell, other stuff. My understanding it's not toxic. Is that correct? Is one, but obviously it's quite pungent. So there's no danger from that aspect. Is one question, and two, I mean, I think I'm quite with you. I mean, the new sites have got to be better than the old ones. My only clarification would be not necessarily on odour, although we've now doubled the amount of chickens and it will take double the amount of time to clear out, is my understanding. It's going to take about 4 days to clear out, is the noise aspect, which again, theoretically, one would hope would be quieter, but you did talk about these high velocity fans. Now, I know the previous ones, which were quite audible, but they gradually built up because they were not automatic. The guy had to go around and turn them on, but these will all go bang and they'll all be switched on. So it's a noise which potentially is less. Have you had any consideration on that side as well? Just a quick question on that one, please.
Yep. So with regard to noise, obviously, I think we've got a condition in there with regard to noise, and noise should have been and would have been considered during the application for the chicken farm. So that should have been looked at that point. Obviously, again, noise is easier to control on the site, so we would be looking at ensuring the layout was such that it ensures that those properties aren't impacted by any way from the noise of that site. The toxic side of things, I think it's probably best. I don't know where I've got it. So control measures on the chicken farm site will reduce emissions as far as possible. Through the permitting process, the UK Health Security Agency will be one of the consultants during that process. And obviously now they're expanding and having more birds. They have gone through a variation process. And again, the UK HSA will be consulted on that. They provide an expert and independent opinion to the regulator on the potential human health impacts of emissions arising from existing or proposed regulated facilities at the permit application stage. Now, they have screening criteria, which for intensive farming applications, where there are public health sensitive receptors within 100 metres of the site. So if people are living further than 100 metres from the site, it sounds like they're not overly concerned. I think in this case, I believe there's a dwelling at the farm. So I'm not sure. Do they have a dwelling at the farm? So if they do, then the UK HSA will be consulted on that.
Sorry, Chair, if I could. So just to pick up on, yes, we do have a condition similar to the odour, an updated noise assessment to be submitted as part of reserve matters to ensure then that any layout. So already you can see on the indicative site plan, there is clearly a buffer as such, but the dwellings are set further towards the west within the site. So again, alongside the odour assessment, the noise impact assessment will make sure that dwellings are suitably designed to limit any kind of noise impact. Yeah, again, standard practice on a reserve matters to get updated reports to inform the layout.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a question, but actually all my queries have been answered very thoroughly by Lewis and by Claire. So I wonder if this is an appropriate time to suggest that we move to the debate. I'm happy to open the debate when you get to that point. Thank you.
Happy to move on to the debate. Oh, not just yet. We've got Councillor Niche.
I can see you want to move on, but it's actually quite important that we do actually get some clarification.
I'm not saying it's not important.
Okay, can I just...
Chair, can I just answer that point? I'm not saying it's not important, but Councillor Niche has asked several questions. I think we've clarified the points. My view is I think we need to move to the debate, but obviously Councillor Niche has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, did you still have these to show up on there? Because I think it's just quite useful, I think, for everybody that haven't managed to visit. My question of clarification goes back to, we're talking about tilted balance, which is obviously a major point here. And I don't know whether it's a question you can or can't answer, but my understanding, without tilted balance, this was going to be probably written up as refusal. I just wondered what those reasons for refusal were, so we can actually understand the difference on balance.
So we obviously have to assess the application in front of us. I think to be clear, and it's set out in the report, that the application in front of you is for 100% affordable dwellings, not to address a local need, but address a district needs. Within the local plan, there's no policies that lend support to I would say a rural exception site that looks to do district affordable dwellings. So I think that's set out in the report and it's clear. Obviously, we're not in that situation anymore. We're in tilted balance. We have to assess the application in front of us on the relevant policies at the time. And in this case, because of tilted balance, key policies like LP2, LP9, LP10 are considered out of date and therefore have reduced weight. So I think, yeah, looking at the report is clear that this is for district needs affordable, but we're in tilted balance and it all has to be weighed up. I hope that answers your question.
I'm just going to bring in Richard, legal.
Yeah, it's just to echo what Lewis has said. Obviously, it's a completely different scenario because of the tilted balance, because you have to assess things as they are in a snapshot in time. So obviously, that overrides other material planning considerations. It changes things in terms of policies that wouldn't have been engaged, but for the tilted balance.
In that case, we're going to move on to the debate. And if Councillor Sanderson still wanted to start off the debate.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't mean to stymie Councillor Niche's contribution because his questions were very important. And I think this questions of clarification for officers have been very key here. And we've had, I think, some excellent detailed explanations from both our officers. It's been very useful to have environmental health here this evening. And I fully understand locals' concerns, the parish council concerns. I think the parish council representative spoke quite well. But my view on this is I don't see as it stands any reason to go against the officer recommendation. This is the second meeting we've discussed this in some detail, rightly so. This is an outline application only. I think condition bullet point 6, as clarified by Lewis, this is up to 30 dwellings, isn't it? It doesn't have to be 30 dwellings. Things will come out at the reserved matters stage. The key thing for me is that we have no objection from our environmental health officer to this. And unless members can persuade me otherwise, my view would be that we approve the application before us. Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Coulson?
Thank you. Tonight we've heard about Wintringham Park, and I think that was a fantastic development, and it's what we try to aspire to. On this one, I'm not sure we're there because we can't see how this impacts on, or the smell and the noise could impact, may impact. And what can happen is we can go forward with this and we then find out we've got it wrong. And at that point, I would feel I've done the affordable housing wrong. I've lived in a village, or I live in a village, whereby we do have, or we had a mushroom factory. Mushroom factory was there, fine. The wind comes in the wrong direction, just as they're mucking out the trays and so on like that, and the whole village feels the impact of that. Complaints went to the parish council, and the parish council had backed them away. They would not report them in, and people would say they reported it to the council. It's the parish council they reported it to. On this one, I'm torn on it because, yes, we need affordable, but we need respectable affordable. And to get that, I feel that it is a bit too early for us to be fully aware of the impact of this, the new chicken farm on that development. It also seems as if it is outside of the built area, albeit I think in the last discussion, it was because it's nearby and it could be within, but that's my feeling. So I will hear to the rest of the debate. As I say, the noise and the odour is for me something that I've experienced in a village, and it's something that is occasional, and that's what I'll say. It is occasional, so it's one of those that I'm sort of not happy with.
Can I get Councillor Butler first and then Councillor Corney?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I do understand with everyone, it is a difficult one. It's difficult for all of us. But the bogeyman is there, which we all know about. So I'll second Councillor Sanderson's proposal, if you'll accept that. This is mainly, as we all know, because of tilted balance. It goes against some of our policies, and in a normal time, it wouldn't hold water. It'd be thrown out straight away. So we have to weigh up. What I consider quite important now is, will it stand up against appeal? And the answer is no, it won't, because we're in tilted balance. We can assume the smell will have some effect. We don't know because it's not up and running. The lucky thing with it is the situation where where this development will be, it's got the prevailing wind behind it, so that's a westerly. So there's a good chance that the odours will be taken away in the other direction. And weighing the whole thing up, when you look at the land use, I know it's agricultural land, and I've just spoke in behalf of it, that we should look at food security. But when I look at the previous application, there's more merit to build on this than there is put solar panels on 250 acre. So I shall be obviously voting for it, Chairman, as I've seconded it. Thank you.
I just want to go back to Tom Clark, Councillor Sanderson, because I don't think he made a formal proposal.
I'm happy to do that now, Chair. Propose approval for this application. Thank you.
Councillor Corney, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is one of those horrible ones where you think you don't really want to go through with this, but I can't. I'm hearing the debate already, and there's not enough reasons there to to say no to it. I think that there's a few contradictions. I think where we're talking about the proximity to number 48. Because that's within the same distance, this is okay. Well, using that as an analogy, we could say, well, okay, there's a house there that's built in a floodplain. Doesn't matter, there's one there already, so we can do another one. It's just it doesn't quite stack up. in my mind in that way, but I know that that's not policy. You'll say there's obviously now been a proposer and a seconder. I certainly wouldn't have been proposing it, but sadly, I feel no other way to go. I think it's too strong a case to sort of to go through. But so I should probably be voting for it, but it'll be disappointingly from my own sort of point of view. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I was listening with care to Councillor Goulson's contribution earlier. I certainly don't wish to put him on the spot, but in the course of subsequent debate, I'd be really keen to know what the policy basis might be for an objection to the smell and the noise, in terms of the phrase that was used, because I'm like Councillor Butler, struggling to see for myself where a defensible refusal would sit here. But I'd invite colleagues to elaborate on that. Councillor Nish may wish to, as I know he hasn't spoken yet. So that's one question. My other question, if the chair will permit me, is aimed probably more in the direction of officers. I appreciate we've moved past that point in debate, but as the chair isn't stopping me. Again, just to check my understanding, I count approximately 25 areas of conditions listed in the recommended approval. I think I know the answer to this, but just to check, in the event Councillor Butler's speculation was right, and if we rejected this, it was overturned on appeal, how many of the 25 areas of condition will we still have the power to impose on this development compared with an approval now subject to the areas of condition?
Difficult question is because if members are minded to refuse the application and it goes to appeal, is no longer in the council's power to impose conditions. We can recommend conditions as part of the appeal process, but it'll be the planning inspector who's a decision maker. So I can't answer that, to be honest, but in my own experience, it's hit or miss, to be honest. You put conditions forwards and it's up to inspectors to then weigh those up against the 6 tests about whether they're reasonable, enforceable, all of those. So yeah, sorry, Councillor Wakeford, but I can't give you a definitive answer on that, apart from it'll be in the power of the inspector.
That's really helpful. And if I may, I think through your chair, I think that does absolutely answer the question I was seeking to clarify, because we, as ever, do have an opportunity in terms of approving an application where there are concerns to enshrine conditions there. Obviously, there's a process for challenging unreasonable conditions and so on, as officers could elaborate for us. But broadly speaking, we set the framework with conditions that we'd apply. There are a great number of areas of conditions, including an additional one around the reserve matters odour assessment that it feels like it is an area of importance to some members. I think losing the opportunity of enshrining the conditions as part of an approval would, in the long run, I suspect we wouldn't be thanked by residents. My simple analysis of this application, and I certainly look forward to hearing any contributions remaining, not least from Councillor Nish, who had plenty of questions earlier but hasn't spoken yet. It is as Councillor Sanderson outlined, as Councillor Butler said as well, and also Councillor Corney, I think more grudgingly concurred with. It is extremely difficult to see an application, to see a refusal stacking up here, especially in light of the fact we're in tilted balance. It's not abundantly clear to me it would be an open and shut case even if we weren't in tilted balance, but as our legal colleague has reminded us, that's completely hypothetical in view of the fact that that we are. So I think the principal objections flagged by the parish council as well won't stack up in terms of LP6, for example. It's not engaged in view of the helpful clarification that we had around what Anglia Water are and are not saying. I think there's clearly a judgment call around LP9, the extent to which it is well related to the area. It is immediately adjacent. It is less close to the chicken farm than an existing residential property. And of course, LP9 we have to take with pinches of salt as it's out of date in any case. So I will hear other contributions as made, but I'm certainly minded to vote with the proposal we've got on the table to approve this.
Thank you. So I know that there's quite a lot of healthy debate going on, and I'd like to take Councillor Niche next, but I'm assuming that this is going to be, second to last question, as we've had quite a lot of discussion already, and we've got a proposer and a seconder on the table. So, Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this one. I think the whole balance on this one, and that's where we're looking at, is we're in tilted balance. And whereas I completely agree to some aspects with Councillor Butler, we're semi-stymied. I think the way I've looked at it is listening to the debate and some of the other aspects that have been put in that, yes, we're in tilted balance, but there's quite a few things in my mind that still stack up and would actually tip it back the other way. The policies aren't out of date, they're just weight carries less. So the fact is it well related to Needhamworth? It's related. I'd argue it's not well related, and even in the report it just says it would probably fall under LP10 as in the countryside. Bear in mind it is a small settlement. Now, small settlements do take and should take affordable housing. We've mentioned affordable housing. Affordable housing carries great weight, don't disagree. But bearing in mind a small settlement of Holywell-cum-Needhamworth has already taken a massive amount of affordable housing. They don't need it as they've already got a rural exception site. So yes, this is for district-wide, but should we be putting all of our affordable housing in a small settlement? It's taken more than a number of towns and villages. It is quite a distance from St Ives, depending how much you like to walk. It is still a reasonable 5 kilometres or 4.8, I think it is, to the town centre, which is, and it is. So I think the way I looked at it is there's a number of issues that I thought the balance on from the tilted perspective brings it back to being, actually, you know what, this is more, there's more harm in this than actually the balance of tilted balance. So I've got countryside, I've got LP6, which I still don't think personally has been clearly answered because there's an objection from the Water Authority. Yes, we put a condition in it's got to fix it, but actually they haven't said we're going to fix it. There's an objection. If we ever get some money down the line, we might fix it. So yes, it'll probably stop it in the future, may or may not. I think there's a health issue, as Councillor Pitt brought up. Smell is not a toxic necessarily issue. I mean, it does affect different smells that affect different people, obviously with different health conditions, but it's another balance that's added to that of an unknown. We've got a new site being put in there, which theoretically could be better, but it's also much bigger. And there's a lot of, to me, there's a lot of unknowns in it. And when I've looked at it and I've looked at the balancing of certain aspects of it, I think we, even in tilted balance, there's still enough there, in my view, that actually tilts it back the other way to say we should refuse it. But that's my view. Just the last one, when you look at the housing ones on there, that the housing that they're proposing is, in my view, equidistant to the one that's already there, not the one that's there is closer, but that's a different matter.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring in Richard from Neagle.
Yeah, it's just in terms of the point that Councillor Naish made about not so much the policy's been out of date, but just being afforded less weight. Legally, they are they are out of date because of paragraph 11D and footnote 8 of the NPPF. This is referred to in the original report from last month, 7.8. So while the council can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, the policies LP2, LP7, LP8, LP9, LP10 are considered out of date and can't be afforded full weight in the determination of planning applications. It's a bit like when Huntingdonshire didn't have an up-to-date local plan. It's the same case that those policies for the supply of housing need to be considered not out of date, and therefore the tilted balance is engaged. So you were half correct in the weight side, but legally they are officially out of date.
Just to go back, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but actually technically we should still take the weight of them, but it's a lesser weight, isn't it?
I mean, with everything, there's a planning balance, but obviously this one, the balance is, to use the colloquial term, tilted in favour of the supply of housing.
And Councillor Pitt, if there's something new. Oh, before you come in, sorry, I'm going to bring in planning officer.
Apologies, just to add to what Richard said. So 7.8 and then kind of onwards, to be clear, so the policies are considered out of date and are given reduced weight. The reduced weight comes more to where we direct housing. So let's take LP9, for example, says land well related to a built up area, only certain types of developments such as a rural exception site would be supported. That part of the policy is considered to carry very little weight. But we still apply weight to the sustainability merits of that policy. Same with LP2, direct development to places which are sustainable. So yeah, just to be clear, but the report does go on and address each of those policies in turn. The same thing with LP10. We wouldn't normally allow residential development in the countryside unless there was a particular reason, such as rural homes and workers, rural exception site again. But in this case, that part of the policy is given less weight. So then we have to assess each application on its own merits, weigh it up, sustainability, etc. Is all covered in the report in the principal development section.
And our last speaker, Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. I'll try to be both new and quick with my comments. So when I moved to my current house in St Neots, I'm about 100 metres from a field, and I didn't know until a few weeks later what muck spreading is. I do now know what it is, and it's not my favourite time of the season. But you do live with these things. I think if I was assigned that house by a social housing provider, I might feel slightly more grumpy about being forced into that situation. So I am really torn on this one. I think on balance, I will support the application, but I think I've encourage officers and the applicant to realise this is something that we're really interested in, concerned about. I think also in terms of its relationship to the village, that's really important as well. I've struggled to see how 30 homes will be delivered within that site. We're approving up to 30 with that as a planning condition. So I look forward with interest to this coming back when it does. Thank you.
So as we've got a proposal and a seconder, we're going to move on to a vote. So all those in favour of the development?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Those against?
1, 2.
And any abstentions?
No.
Okay, that's carried. And we're going to take a quick comfort break. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're going to now move on to item 5A, which is St. Neots, and it'll be presented by Mari Roseman.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin, I would just like to tell members that after the late reps was received on Friday afternoon, we received an email from St. Neots Town Council withdrawing their support for the application. And so I'm just going to carry on with the presentation. So the application is at land at 516 Great North Road in Eaton Ford, and the proposal is for the erection of a 2-bedroom barn-style property and associated works. The application has come to DMC because the officer's recommendation of refusal is contrary to the original comments from the Town Council, which were approval. So the application site is here, edged in red. It's on the northern side of Crossall Road. The site is currently comprised of open land with a high timber closed boarded fence around the perimeter of the site, apart from a gated access here to the south east and a gate to the rear. At the front of the site is a band of high conifer hedges, and surrounding the site is mostly residential with Crosshall Manor here to the north, open land to the northeast, number 204 Crossall Road to the right, residential development to the south, and the Eaton Oak Public House here on the other side of the roundabout. So the site is in St. Neots Conservation Area, shown here with the purple hatch. The pink buildings are a listed building with the Eaton Oak here, approximately 72 metres from the site, which is the Eaton Oak Public House, which is a Grade 2 listed building. And here to the north, approximately 26 metres from the boundary, is Crossall Manor. This is a Grade 2 star listed building. And this is notable as it's a particularly important building of more than special interest and has higher levels of protection than Grade 2 listed buildings. The site is also within the St. Neots Conservation Area, shown on the right as a historical site. This is the proposed site plan. You can see a single dwelling that is to be located centrally within the site. It also has 2 off-road parking spaces with block paved drive and turning points. It retains the high timber closed boarded fence, but blocks up a gate here to the rear. And the proposal proposes the removal of the existing conifers and replace with mixed hedging. So this is the elevation of the site. And it's a barn-style property with black timber featherboard edging on the outside and clay pantiles. And these are my site photos. So this is me standing on the opposite side of the road looking into the site. And standing at the gate looking left, you can see Crosshall Manor, just glimpses behind this tree. And then looking into the rear of the site. And then standing on the diagonal side of Crosshall Road looking into the site, you can see glimpses of Crosshall Manor. And then standing at the gate, looking towards the Eaton Oak Grade 2 Public House. And then looking right to the site towards 204 Crosshall Road. So members should be aware of the planning history of the site, here shown on the left. Specifically, a non-determination appeal in 2021, which was dismissed on heritage grounds. Noting that the site was visually and physically separated from Crosshall Manor, the inspector concluded that the site, as an open and spacious parcel of land, contributed positively to the Grade 2 star listed building and wider conservation area. The inspector also noted the height of the 2021 proposal at approximately 4 metres would be seen from the grounds of Crosshall Manor and the Grade 2 star listed building itself. So the image on the right is the proposed site plan of the current proposal. The proposed dwelling would be approximately 5.4 metres in height. So notwithstanding the erosion of the site as open land contributing to the setting of the Grade 2 listed building, it is officers' view that this proposed building would still be visible from Crosshall Manor itself and its grounds and would be detrimental to the setting of the Grade 2 star listed building. So while the council is in a tilted balance, it is appreciated that the proposal would deliver one dwelling in a sustainable location, and it would also contribute to the housing supply and to the wider and local economy. It is considered that the proposal is contrary to local plan policy LP 34 and Chapter 16 of the NPPF and would cause significant and demonstrable harm to the setting of Crosshall Manor and the St Neots Conservation Area. Therefore, as per paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework, officers encourage members to refuse the application due to heritage harm, as set out within Part 8 of the accompanying officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that report. And we have two speakers for this item, who will be sharing the time as the applicant and the agent. Simon Richardson and Bob Ferrer. Is it just yourself tonight? I just want to clarify that you've got 3 minutes to share. So, yes, no worries. And would you like to start?
Middle one, sorry. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. Thanks to Marie for the run through there. I won't rehearse the arguments in favour of the proposals already set out within the application. I'm sure everyone will be familiar with those. So instead, if I just do a quick sort of few bullet points, mindful of time constraints, but please ask any questions and we'll be able to go into fuller answers later. So what you have before you is a proposal which represents sustainable development. It's located within a sustainable location within the built-up framework of St Neots. We have no objections or any concerns with any access or servicing arrangements. There's no flood risk, no drainage concerns, no soil contamination. BNG gain is achievable. There are no concerns with protected species or any ecology habitat issues. We have no tree objection. There was initially a tree objection that was withdrawn once it was pointed out the fence, which Marie referred to, is already there. We have no concerns, or I think and certainly no objections from any neighbours with regards to amenity or overshadowing any of those sort of issues. We've had no concerns about the design or materials of the proposal. In essence, we have concerns about what's described as the loss, I think, of a green and verdant open space, which is actually a subdivided parcel of land which has benefit of consent from HDC for independent use, separate from the manor and its grounds, which has been enforced for many years. The site is fenced with a consent from HDC for the fence. It has an existing dropped curb and vehicular access with consent from HDC, and the parallels with the previous appeal scheme from 5 or 6 years ago. It's a very different property. That one, I think, was a very modern and overly articulated design. What you have now is a much simpler rectangular barn style property. So I think that's probably what I will say on the planning merits. And I think Bob has some other issues he'd like to raise as well.
Thank you, members. Well, some of you know I've been here many times before. I've known this bit of land for 30 years. I've worked in the Crosshall Manor and so on, and I owned a bit of land for 10 years, and I put some of the previous applications in, and they were all turned down, basically because of the heritage thing. Now, I'd like to ask, how many of you have been and visited the site? Put your hands up, those who have visited the site.
Sorry, that's not relevant to this discussion.
Sorry?
Thank you. Sorry, you can't ask that question.
Why not? Excuse me.
I think that
Stop. We're going to stop there. I've asked a question. They put their hands up. We're there. Finished. Right. So all of you have been.
Just run out of time. I'm sorry, you've run out of time.
You're taking my time, telling me I'm going to do my bit.
Apologies, you've run out of time. I'm really sorry. You're going to have to stop you there.
Sorry?
Going to have to stop you there.
You're going to stop me?
Yes.
You can't.
I advised you in the beginning.
Excuse me. He's had 2 minutes and I want 1 minute.
Absolutely not. I've told you in the beginning you had 3 minutes to share. How you chose to share that time was totally up to you, and now you've run out. And that's end of discussion.
Let me tell you something. I've known that land all this time. Now, there's an interest.
Sorry, members should disregard this because it's outside of the speaking time that is afforded to all applicants.
I hope, Clara, I hope you stand by me and let me speak because you know what I've been talking about and the lady next door does. Now, if I'm not allowed to speak, then this contraption here, what you call a planning committee, which I've served on many years ago, I know what's going on. I've been there.
Yeah, we're just going to re-adjourn the meeting. So we're going to move on to questions of clarification for our speaker. Are there any members who would like to ask any questions? That's a no, so you can take a seat.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am extremely sorry. One more disruption and we're going to have to ask you to leave. Thank you. And now we're going to move on to questions of clarifications for our officers. And there aren't any, so we're going to now move on to our discussion. Would anyone like to start the discussion? Councillor McAdam.
Yeah. Councillor Sanderson and I went and visited the site, looked at it, and quite honestly, we felt that the objections were a little bit over the top. If you go around the buildings, the manor, etc., you don't even really see it. You just see the roof sticking out. I didn't really feel that the views from a heritage point of view were particularly harmed at all. Given the design of the building, which is quite attractive actually, I feel, it's my opinion, I felt that it would have fitted in quite well. I've driven around there many, many times, and I didn't even know that manor was there until it was pointed out. So on balance, I'm tending towards approval actually, but that's just me. And I listen to other arguments. Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I note the objections though that we do have from our conservation officer. Can't find them in the report. And they're quite a thorough objection there. And I understand the potential damage to the heritage assets. Probably should have asked this at the questions of clarification. The appeal which was dismissed, was that for non-determination or were there other reasons behind that?
Yeah, it was brought forward because of non-determination. But that is not relevant. The relevant is that it was dismissed at appeal on heritage grounds.
So it was dismissed on heritage grounds?
Yes.
Appeal. Okay, thank you for that clarification. So I think Councillor McAdam, my initial view was, I'm not sure if I can see a huge problem here, but I think looking back at some of the comments and the clarification here, I can well understand why we would be objecting to this. But I'm happy to listen to other views.
Councillor Butler.
Well, I was expecting everybody to go vehemently against this and refuse it, but I, like Councillor McAdam, spent quite a while wandering around there, and the listed building was not very relevant, really. Shrouded in trees, and the trees weren't even in leaf, so that it was some form of dwelling, I feel, could go on that land. After the upset of this evening, it'd be nice if the applicant and the council got together and tried to come up with something, but this barn effect, I think, would sit in there. And as I said on the previous application, I look also at appeal. If it's passed and the applicant appeals, will that stand up? That's what goes through my mind. Will we win at appeal? Remembering that, of course, this appeal was made and decided not in tilted balance. It was in a different era. This is where we had a 5 year land supply. Will the inspector look on it differently now because we're in tilted balance? I mean, I'll stand to be corrected, but these are the thoughts that go through my mind when I'm trying to decide, is this a goer or not? I just feel, I don't know. I mean, with what's happened tonight, I'd rather not vote on this because I think we're all muddled up a bit with, you know, I'm sorry to say, with the applicant, the way he's attacked the situation. And I don't know whether we can give a clear decision in this case, whether we need to just stand back and look at it again, and probably at a fuller council meeting we will get a bit better representation, if you like, because we're a bit, to be honest, we're a bit thin on the ground tonight, and I value other members' comments as well. But those are the thoughts that are going through my mind. If we have to decide tonight, I mean, I'm looking for someone to convince me that this is going to be harmful to the listed building. But at the moment, I can't really see it that badly. And I'm sure, as I say, if they could get together, I know we have to decide on the application before us tonight, but I'm not happy doing that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Well, I agree that disruption we've had earlier this evening wasn't acceptable, but we make a decision based on the papers in front of us and in the context of the policy and legal framework we've got. So I certainly do feel comfortable as making a decision this evening, and my analysis of this accords with that of the officers. I think the report from 7.20 onwards across a number of pages to 7.48 engages carefully with the impact on heritage assets. I think we're reminded that this is in the top, what was it, 5.6, 5.8% of most special listed buildings. And we've got objections not only from HGC's own conservation officer, but also Historic England as well, to the development in the vicinity of Crosshall Manor. As we were reminded on the slides, that the Crosshall area is of enormous historic significance, but the appearance of that has been lost, requiring careful management of the street scene area in planning terms. We heard earlier a long list on behalf of the applicant of respects in which this doesn't offend against rules, but I think that this is quite clearly a case where the focus of our concern should be on the heritage matters as set out helpfully in the report and in the presentation, and it's clear there's significant harm to me, and most crucially, it's clear that that's the view of the relevant experts who we defer to. We can then consider that as we see fit, but we are informed by the experts who advise us as statutory consultees, and their views are set out clearly in the document. So I'm certainly keen to propose refusal of this application. And as Councillor Butler reminds us, of course, there's always a measure of uncertainty with appeals, but to my analysis, I'm content as taking that risk on this one. It may be changed at a later date, but my read of this is that the correct decision is refusal. So happy to put that proposal on the table, Chair.
Thank you. I will accept that as a proposal. Would anyone else like to contribute to the discussion? Councillor Nish.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to mention it's disappointing the town councils. So they change of heart, or actually not even being here to explain some of that. But moving on from that one, there is a difficult one here, because in some aspects, if you took away the main aspect, which is the heritage thing, you go, well, that looks all right. I can go in there. Surprisingly, I was a bit concerned about the roadway, but obviously highways aren't, but it's quite close to that roundabout. And I thought, to me, that was almost more of an objectionable perspective, but they haven't complained about it. So fair enough. And I suppose their argument is it's only one house. They can turn around in there and come out. So fair enough. I do have problems from a double whammy perspective because we've got listed properties close by, but also it's in a conservation area. So to me, that's a double whammy. It's almost like you've really got to come up with good reasons in this one. I think the actual building itself is quite pleasing. I think it could be quite nice and fit in there. I just struggle in my own mind that whether it's acceptable from that aspect. Tilted balance bugs me a little bit as well because there is that one there, but it is only one property. We're not talking about 30 or 40. I'm minded to refuse on with the officer's recommendation of refusal on it at the moment. I'll propose that. Second it.
Thank you. I'll take that as a second. Would anyone else like to speak on this item before we move to a vote? Okay, I'm just going to bring in our planning officer.
Hi members, I just wanted to clarify something in regards to paragraph 11D. Point I of paragraph 11D of the MPPF says that the application in this framework that protect areas or assets of particular importance provides a strong reason for refusing the development proposed. So this is 7.83 of the officer report. And then the next paragraph said, the footnote number 7 in the MPPF states that the policies referred to are those in this framework rather than those in development plans that relate to, and one of those things is heritage assets, designated heritage assets, and other heritage assets of archaeological interest. And then 7.84 discusses harm, and essentially I discussed the fact that given the appeal site that was dismissed at appeal, the introduction of a dwelling there would cause the same harm. And then at 7.85, I say that the above identified heritage harms forms a strong reason for refusing the development, as set out in paragraph 11D(I) and footnote 7. And so therefore the tilted balance would be disengaged and there is no need to move forward to the test in paragraph 11D. So then moving on to paragraph 7.91 on the next page, we do acknowledge that the applicant has submitted a reduced scheme to address the previous reasons for refusal. However, what we are taking into account is the special interests of the site as within the setting of a grade 2 star listed building, which in my presentation I noted that it gives greater protection than grade 2 listed buildings and it's more safeguarded. So it is considered the introduction of a dwelling and associated residential paraphernalia would not be acceptable in line with the previous appeal decision.
Councillor Wakeford.
So is it worth asking officers just to underline the conclusion of that reminder then that tilting balance is not engaged in this application per 7.85?
Yes, so I just want to clarify with you that, we do consider that the tilted balance is disengaged because of the significant heritage harm that would be less than substantial.
Yeah, so thank you for that clarification. I am still going to go moving on to the vote. So all those in favour? Sorry. All those. Sorry. In favour of refusal?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
All those against the recommendation?
1, 2.
Any abstentions? No, so that's carried.
It's refused.
That's refused, sorry. So we're now going to move on to the last item on the agenda, which is appeal decisions. Has everyone made it in the room?
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this brief because it's been a long night. So just moving through them, I'll focus on the ones that have been allowed. So the first one is raising dam levels at Taylor's Dredging, Bromholm Lane, Brampton. That is a site opposite the EA offices. It's in the floodplain. The site had achieved lawful status as storage through certificates over the passage of time. What they wanted to do was raise the land levels to stop the material stored on the site being washed away during a flood event. The EA opposite, they said you're removing the land out of the floodplain. One application was refused. They came back for a reduced scheme. It was non-determination. It went to appeal, and then they submitted a certificate outlining that they had PD rights to build a wall. The inspector then took that into account. Also took into account the fact that they could store anything on the site up to any height. It's unlimited because it's just a certificate, lawfulness, and therefore the appeal was allowed. Obviously, the council stood by the EA's decision to object to it, given that it's opposite their offices and could have impeded their ability to respond to flood events. But the inspector took other material considerations into account. I should add that was a hearing. That was only a couple of months ago. The second one is a PIP, so it's a permission in principle. I don't think we've done one here at committee, but it's similar to an outline, but without conditions. It just focuses on, in principle, could residential development go there? It was a judgment call by officers. We thought it was in the countryside. The inspector disagreed, took into account bus stops, a path, etc. I think you can see a bit of a shift there in the planning inspectors on how they're focusing on residential development, the fact that there's been a clear move to build new houses, but that will still have to come back with what we call technical details consent, which is basically a planning permission. So this is only a kind of a tick, but they still have to apply for planning permission. The next one is 10 Greenfields, Fenstanton. Why it says allowed, it was actually they removed the condition and then just changed the condition and put it back on. So just change some word, another condition. So I think in terms of it, it's pretty much in line with what we went with. The next one, Fenside Caravan Park, Warboys, another hearing. This had previous permission for touring caravans, basically a recreational caravan site. They wanted to increase the hours. Officers gave weight to a previous appeal decision of why it was allowed. Circumstances have changed since then in terms of how that site is viewed in the wider landscape. The inspector came to a different conclusion. So that's now been granted an extension. And then I want to say the rest of them were dismissed. So I won't go through those in detail. I should add that we successfully defended costs on the PIP as well, which is worth to note. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I'm going to draw this meeting to a close. Do I bash this?